Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our last in our webinar series for the second year of the HIV Housing and Employment Project. Today's webinar will be on client coaching, and the particular focus of this is going to be coaching clients towards self-sufficiency in housing, employment, and medical care. This is definitely a topic that we're going to be exploring even further as we get into year 3. So we're just going to do some light touches here and then prepare everybody for year 3. So our instructions are, as usual, we are recording this webinar, and we're going to save the recording and make it available via our ETAP website. Plus, we'll also post it on Basecamp as usual, so you can access it now and in the future. And we're asking you to use computer or telephone audio for this call. Everyone is muted until we unmute you, so don't worry about having to press *6 as you do in other calls to mute or unmute yourself. To minimize background noises, we are muting everyone. And if you have a question, you can use the chat box, or you can use the little raise your hand icon, and we can call on you there. And if you're having any technical difficulties, as usual, just let us know in the chat box, and that will be monitored by Julia, and she will let us know if there are any technical challenges that you all are having. Next slide. Hi, I'm Jane Fox. No, I'm just kidding. This is Jessica Flaherty, but hopefully Jane will be joining us in just a few. She's the co-PI for the ETAP, and I'm the program director for the ETAP, and I'm going to do the moderating until she gets here. And we are joined by the lovely and talented James Apt. He is also a member of our ETAP team. He's also a clinical case manager at Boston Healthcare for the Homeless Program. And by Sylvia, the beautiful Sylvia Moscarillo with the beautiful cat ears. She is also a member of our ETAP team, and she's the program director at Liberty Community Services in Connecticut. And today, our learning objectives are, we're hoping that everyone by the end of this webinar will be able to identify and apply strategies for coaching clients to individualize their goals. We hope that folks will understand how to break down goals into micro steps that are achievable. We definitely want our clients to feel like they are making progress, so we're going to break those things down into micro steps. We're going to learn to identify the resources that are in the client's life, so thinking about a more assets-based approach, thinking about people, communities, et cetera, that will facilitate the transition to self-sufficiency. And then lastly, we are going to understand the importance of celebrating client accomplishments, both large and small. So here we are, the journey to self-sufficiency, one step at a time, and I'm going to hand it over to James and Sylvia.
Yes, I think that's me. So of those learning objectives, those are 4 very fine learning objectives. My favorite of those 4, if I had to pick one, would really be celebrating client accomplishments, large and small. And having said that, you know, I think that's extra important because we're working with a population that have a lot of challenges and a lot of barriers to success. And what I appreciate most about the clients that I have the privilege of serving is that, you know, they do as much as they do. They get done as much as they do, and that they're, you know, I'm just speaking for myself. In my 20+ years in the field, I mean, all of the clients that I've worked with have been unique or special in some way. And I think it really helps to appreciate the population you work with if you can understand a little bit about their background, and that, you know, we're working with people who not only, you know, we talk a lot about trauma and trauma-informed care. I mean, I work with an older population, and we're talking about decades of accumulated trauma, and sort of, you know, it just piles up one on top of another. And I think one thing that might be common in the population that I serve is that a lot of our patients, you know, have had periods, you know, long or short, where they maybe haven't been engaged in care. So it's not like people are having trauma and it's being addressed or treated. It just kind of compounds. So by the time they, you know, they arrive at your door, they have a lot going on, and they're labeled, you know, quote unquote acute. but I've found that it's a great population to work with if you can just sort of come to some sort of consensus about, what the goals are and in what order to attack the goals. And I think also, as I'm going to keep saying the phrase, as someone who's worked in the field 20 plus years, but I think it's also important in the same way that we are really striving to get to know our clients and build a relationship with them, to also know ourselves as well as we possibly can, and sort of what our triggers are, what our strengths are as case managers and patient navigators, and I mean, there are populations that I feel really comfortable working with, and there's some that I maybe feel a little bit less so. So I've done a lot of thinking, especially in the past 4 or 5 years, about how I can be more effective. And sometimes it points back to sort of like introspection and really thinking about, we ask patients about their goals, and we need to think about what our goals are and make sure that our goals match their goals. It has to be a good fit, and there has to be unity there. And I don't know if people, we want this call to be interactive. At some point, it'd be good to talk about whether, some of the other people on the call, whether they sort of think about these things like sort of, I've made no secret of the fact that, I have a harder time working with, adults who are actively drinking. Like, that's just not that's not a population, and a population that I am strong at working with, and I get really impatient, but then I always check myself. So I'm always sort of, the same way I'm trying to pick up cues from clients, I'm also trying to pick up cues from myself about my reaction when I'm talking to clients. So it's kind of like splitting yourself in two. And lastly, sort of, we want to get to know our clients. We want to know ourselves as well as possible. And then, knowing our roles and being able to communicate that effectively to the person that we're serving. So there's no, you want to aim for maximum transparency in terms of, this is who I am, this is my role, this is what we're going to be working on, because this is what you've told me, does that sound correct, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a lot of, it's a lot of defining and redefining in the context of a working relationship, and it's really, really complex.
James, thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful to have a person, who has taken the time to look inside and say, there are some things with different populations that, cause me to take a step back, and I have to constantly check myself. And I know that I work on that as well, and in those instances, that's where some of our tools come into play. And
yep.
We do have a toolbox. Is this mine, James?
I think it is.
Thank you very much. See how I prompted me? Anyway, you do have a lot of tools actually to work with, and a lot of them include the training that you've had in the past, and we're lucky to be working in these times where people have put together some of the best practices based upon what they learned by researching what many of us have been doing for years. So motivational interviewing, take a look at those skills. You've all been practicing that for years. We've had a lot of evidence-based practice around assessments and strengths-based assessments and acuity scoring, and the identifications of needs and what that means for what you're going to be working on, and identifying not just needs, but we shift to a strengths-based approach, looking at what the assets are the person has, looking at what they do well, and being really mindful of reflecting back to them who they are and what you see, and that you are seeing strengths. Going back to the slide that we just had, we're working with people with severe needs, severe behavioral health needs, who are coming with early childhood trauma that is only exacerbated by the instability in their lives. So we do get a person who has learned to survive the unsurvivable, and sometimes their strategies, pose some barriers, some other barriers, but we've got to look at that with compassion and continue to do that. This is where, in instances where there's a person that you find as you look at yourself, I don't really I'm not the best person for this person, or I notice that I have certain triggers when I work with this person, like James was talking about. For him, a population that he notices has a reaction in him are actively drinking adults. That's where your case comes. The case conference comes in, or your team. In many instances, I learned years ago to direct my team to switch caseloads if they've come to the end of a road with someone, or they feel their effectiveness is spent, or the triggers are just too great. Then there's no harm, no foul in admitting that, because there's plenty of people to serve, don't worry. Another tool that we all have is obviously what is going on around us in our community. You must know what there is. So we have resources, but more than the resource, it's our knowledge of those resources and how to access them. That is a huge tool in your toolkit. Perhaps people can raise their hands here if there's some tools you'd like to describe that you can't live without, or write a note. And please feel free to do that. I'm going to give 5 seconds. I'm moving on. Oh, wrong one. Sorry, guys. So, James, this one is you.
It is me, yes. So, so there's tools and there's strategies. And in looking at these slides, which we developed together, and hearing Sylvia speak, sort of another layer that's there is also that, these phrases like strengths perspective and motivational interviewing, our clients never use this, and I would never use it to talk with a client. I think it's a little striking that we've developed our own separate language that we speak in that is then translated. I mean, because, we translate it for the clients that we work with. I'm sure they're capable of understanding a phrase like motivational interviewing, but they shouldn't have to. I think a lot of what we do in terms of that interpretation is done very organically and very naturally with the clients that we sort of click with. So in terms of strategies, if you think of your relationship with a client as being like, a house or something, a trusting relationship, a good relationship is the foundation. Without that, I mean, ultimately we want our clients to feel as though, I have a great case manager, they really believe in me, they really understand me. So without that sort of trusting relationship, nothing else is really going to be as good as it could be. And I think early on in my case management career, I would sort of get nervous about addressing things with clients. I would feel as though maybe, like I've gotten much better at clarifying and sort of soliciting opinion from them, or sort of telling them sort of what my take on something is. I think that's developed over time because I want that foundation to be as good as possible. And if patients know that they can also do the same with me, sort of, talk to me about stuff like, the last time we met, you said this and I didn't quite understand why. That helps me be a better case manager. And the fact that they understand that it helps me be a better case manager and that I want to be a better case manager, I think sort of that's what you want, that back and forth where people can talk to you in a way that helps the whole situation be better and help us develop our skills and improve their situation. So with that trusting relationship, there have been clients over the years where I've sort of clicked with immediately, but in almost every other case, it takes time because it's like any other relationship where, you get to know each other and there's a series of sort of yellow lights there where the person can either sort of decide to move forward or stop. And getting to know a person is really challenging. People are complex, and especially if we're talking about a population with just, such a history of trauma, if they've been sort of treated poorly by the system and had great case managers who then left their jobs and they felt abandoned, and if they've had problems with their family not really understanding them, why would they jump into this and trust you 100% right away? That would be foolish. So I think whenever possible, we want to allow our patients to, sorry, go ahead. I heard a sound. We want to allow our patients to get to know us over time and allow us to get to know them over time. And also that second part, reserve judgment. It's easy for someone to come into your office and you sort of reduce them to a series of issues, but that's not who people are. You cannot. People evolve, people change, people move forward, people move backwards. So if someone comes into your office and you think that you can sort of reduce them to their basic elements, I think I found that I'm very much mistaken whenever I made any sort of assumptions. But it's a good opportunity to sort of discuss what you're picking up on with the person in front of you. This next one, attempts the possible. Sylvia came up with that, and I love her for it. All sort of big goals can be broken down into smaller goals, which can be broken down into smaller steps. They're kind of like Legos in that respect, in that they're all, the smaller you can break them down and sort of identify the parts, the better, especially with goals and the steps needed to accomplish those goals. And again, that involves a lot of dialogue. I think it's harder when you have people that they may have sort of like some active paranoia or other stuff going on. But I find that that's where motivational interviewing comes in, and sort of asking basic questions like, okay, so we've talked a lot about this problem. What would it take to sort of address this problem, and what would the first step be? And listen to what the person has to say. In most cases, again and again, case management is just, the clients usually have all of the answers, and we're just sort of validating that. In terms of we come in to help with resources and identity, but they know what the steps are and what the goals are. We're just helping them clarify it and refine it and organize it. And then also another part of this is that, we talk so much about goals, but dreams and hopes are something beyond that. I mean, we work with people sort of, in my case, I work with people in a medical setting, and we're helping them identify goals connected to medical care and housing and these sort of very dry things. A dream or a hope can be something much grander or more kind of like romantic, or sort of, it can go outside of those areas, such as, retention and care and, housing. Like a dream and a goal, it's a great thing to discuss because it really does reinforce hope with people. Not like, we always want to, my goal is to always get people thinking beyond what we're working on. So you want housing, and I want to get you into good housing, but my goal for you is for you to have great housing. And what would and talking to them what would your ideal housing look like? That's where you get into that realm of dreams and hopes and all that. Because I don't think that a lot of the clients we're working with have been allowed to discuss or think that way before, and so it might be challenging for them at first, but we want them to have hope on as great a scale, like realistic expectations, but never lose hope. Managing expectations, that sort of dovetails right into it, where someone comes to me and they say, I would like to be president. 10 years ago, I might have said that would be difficult. It seems anyone can be president nowadays, so I will be less skeptical about that. I will say, well, you might actually be able to be president. Who knows? But talking to people about expectations, it's this weird sort of intersection of hopes, dreams, expectations. There's a little bit of identifying patterns. There's a little bit about goals and steps. It's a lot of fancy dancing to do with someone, and our job is to sort of make the patient or client feel relaxed and calm while we're discussing sort of how all of these things intersect. So that to me, that one bullet point is managing expectations. That is the art of effective case management. You always want a client to leave a meeting with you feeling more relaxed and more confident than when they entered the room. Would you say that's a fair thing to say, Sylvia?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say that's fair.
All right. It doesn't always happen that way, but that's the goal. So identifying patterns of behavior with the client. I do this over time with people, and sometimes it's little things, sometimes it's nonverbal stuff. Sometimes it can be very sort of obvious stuff. I don't think we have any way of knowing what a client's perception of themselves is. So I think sometimes we have to sort of show them a little bit about who they are. And I think the way that we do that has to be very discreet and sort of very indirect in some cases, and in other cases it has to be very, very direct. But I regularly say to patients, like, you know, one thing I've noticed about you is like we have a meeting at 11, you show up at 10:45, like you're really attentive to like time management, and you want to sort of look for how that is a translatable skill. I mean, I would ask myself, you know, if that's a pattern of behavior, would that be a pattern of behavior if someone had to pay rent on the 1st? Would they be a little bit early with it? Like, it's interesting to see how people can be consistent in all areas of their lives, and also how people might have inconsistency in different areas around the same stuff. It's what makes people, makes people fascinating. And even yesterday, I had a fellow case manager who said, you know, I don't know, I kept trying to sit down to write this letter excusing someone from court, and I just couldn't do it. There was, like, I can write other kinds of letters, and that's no problem, but this thing with getting them excused from jury duty, it was such a barrier, I had to ask for help. And then we talked about that. It's just really interesting. People's inconsistencies and consistencies, I find it fascinating. Taking inventory, I think if you're working on a short-term goal, you know, taking inventory is always kind of a good thing, but more important with long-term goals, like the components involved in approaching a goal, the components involved in a strategy will not remain the same over the course of implementing the strategy. They'll change. And again, they're modular and you kind of move them around. So just checking in with patients or clients regularly to say, okay, so just to be clear, this is what we're working on, this is how we're approaching it, is it still working for us, do we want to change anything, if we want to change something, what stays, what goes, guide me on this. And then lastly, the X factor principle, despite the best laid plans of mice and men, sometimes something will swoop in from left field and just torpedo everything, and you kind of have to factor that in. I think our clients have had enough sort of unexpected stuff happen that they can understand this. But I think for us, how it plays out is whenever I'm talking to a client, what I always say is, my goal is you and I will work together to accomplish the following, and my hope is that this is how it will go and this is how it should go. And we have to sort of be on guard for things that could come in unexpectedly, things that could intrude. And it could be personal, it could be life circumstances, it could be unexpected medical issues, it could be loss of funding from an agency that we're applying to, it could be me being laid off, it could be anything. But just sort of really factoring in for the unexpected, very, very important.
And when those things happen and torpedo the plans, we step in and keep people's hopes alive. And it may be as little as, I've seen things like this happen before, we're going to work through it, and I'm here, and I promise you I'm going to do all the steps I can, and I'm going to tell you what you have to do. But we can together figure this out. And I think that's really important, so they walk away from that, what could be a disaster, with some sense that somebody's got their back. And that's almost the best we can do sometimes.
That's true. And when Sylvia told me that she wanted to be president of the United States, I said I would vote for you, but what's the plan B? I think plan Bs more and more, even if you never use the plan B, it's good to get people talking about what the plan B is or the plan C, just so that you're thinking a couple steps ahead. You don't want to predict doom, but you want to plan for it.
Yeah.
And I would never say any of this to a client, like I'm going to plan for doom, but just having a plan B or a plan C. If someone says, like, my hope is to be reunited with my family, and this is how we're going to do it, and I say, would it help to meet with a therapist here so you could do sort of some planning on that end? And what if they're not immediately thrilled to see you? What's the plan B there? I mean, sometimes you have to ask people, like, or make them aware of really tough scenarios, but I feel like it's our duty as case managers to do that, just to get people thinking, because if they might be, the client might be asking themselves this, or might be thinking about it, but afraid to sort of confront it. And if you take their hand and sort of guide them into it, and hopefully, everything goes well and everything goes as planned. But if not, what's the plan B?
And, just kind of going back for a moment, this actually feeds into this next slide, and I'm sorry I changed them so quickly. Having the person's back, talking to them about what a plan B is, all those things are parts of productive relationships. And many of the people that we serve may not be thinking about how important social relationships are to the quality of our lives, and how important personal relationships are, and successful ones where there are, quid pro quos, where they have, I know that you've heard the word social capital, but social capital makes our lives work. This society, being a solitary being, doesn't typically end up in a good place if you're not connected, because we are a connected type of a society. And so we're a conduit to them learning to develop productive, positive relationships. They're practicing with us. So our coming through, even acknowledging our weaknesses in some ways, like, I know this, but I don't know that, or, sometimes these things frustrate me when I'm working on them. That's an honest thing, and I'm going to work through that with you. But we are practicing them developing a tool that could lead to, when you talk about hopes and dreams, a happy, healthy life. Not just a life, but a happy, healthy life. And that their relationship with us, the coach, and the person served, that relationship can be the template for successful relationships and the possibility of a happy, healthy life. And I believe that, I was reflecting before this webinar, and I was talking about it with my colleague, Sarah, that there is a client we're serving now, and, one of the staff here is serving, that we had started serving about 5 years ago, and James, you made me think of this, that it was sort of a trigger. It's a person that I actually can't even hear talk, because they're the people who complain about nothing in my brain, and like, I can't stand it, stop it, it's all fixed. And so I realized that I never gave this guy a fair shake, because all I heard was what felt like really annoying complaints at the beginning. I'm sorry to admit this about myself. And when he bounced back into care after a real terrible thing happened in his life that was extremely unfair to me, I invited him out for coffee at a nice coffee shop. And I said to him, you know what, I didn't give you a chance before. I really wasn't fair. I don't feel good about how our working relationship was. And I want you to know that I've got your back now. And I think that I did not hear the things you were saying. I didn't hear them well. So I'm listening. And we have gone through a really difficult 10 months, because all these stops and starts in this terrible process of getting housed have been tremendously challenging. But I think our essential, strong interaction with authentic communication has been what has kept it manageable for him, where he has survived some really terrible things, because he knew that we were here, and that if all else fails, he knew that the people that he was working with here felt the same way, that they honored him and were going to help him. So I can't underestimate relationship building, and this was transformational for me, even after all these years, because I really couldn't hear his name without it triggering me. So I'm embarrassed about that, but I owned up to it just now.
Thank you. I mean, I think...
Yeah.
I think it'd be weird if people worked their entire lives and didn't have one or two people where just something was, there's that kind of like, there's just that not that natural kind of rapport. That, I mean, Are other people on the call there must be one or two people where it's just sort of like it's harder for you to work with them, right? Am I crazy?
5-second rule.
I guess so.
Okay, we can see some notes later if people want to put in questions and stuff.
And can I point out one thing that it's a pet peeve of mine in talking about like what you said about relationship building. I agree with 100%. My pet peeve is when I'm working with someone who might have another kind of case manager, and I say, how's it going with this other case manager? And they say, oh, they're really, really nice. And then I say, like, I don't need them to be nice. I need them to be effective. Like I think niceness is overrated, personally. If I had to choose between the two, like, the thing about your story about your client where, like, initially you kind of didn't connect, but then you did, the reason he comes to you is he knows you have his back and that he can count on you. And that relationship is really, really important. Like, he just needs you to sort of, like, be there for him. And I've met in my 20 plus years in the field, I've met so many case managers that were nice, but that's kind of all they were. Like I like the case managers to come in and kick ass, like you, Sylvia. And that's why patients stick with case managers over a period of time, because they get stuff done.
Well, I was talking to him today, and I said something. What are you doing today now? Stop rushing me. I said it like that, and I said, I talk to you so nicely, don't I? And he said, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Right, because that's how families speak to each other, and that's kind of, there should be an element of that in your working relationships. And also, I mean, so you go through 10 months of sort of like really tough housing work with this guy. He's being sent. Well, what kills me is that a lot of our clients are being sent the message that you aren't, like, we're trying to do all this stuff around self-esteem and goals and hopes. The message people are being sent by the systems is you're not really worthy of it, and if you get housing, it might not be very good housing, but you should be grateful for it. And I am grateful whenever someone gets housed. But I would love to see all of our clients in amazing housing, not just kind of like, housing. Like, I want the best for them. Otherwise, how are people going to have that sense of self-esteem and accomplishment if they're not given housing that's worthy of them?
Exactly. And again, I went on to another slide too fast, so I'm sorry if people were reading a slide while James was speaking. But let's just go back to this phrase that a friend of mine said this to me many years ago. She said, attempt the possible. And she was working in on a crisis hotline, on a mobile crisis unit. And I thought, well, if anybody knows about attempting the possible, it's someone on a mobile crisis unit overnight who's going to go respond to something pretty serious. And so I stuck with it. That was a lesson from Carmela. And so what we want to do is break things into steps, which, again, this is a probably preach to the choir type thing, but don't underestimate it, because you're doing it and draw attention to it. To get housing is 1,000 steps. I mean, there are so many steps, it's crazy. Sometimes you do 3 steps in one day. Sometimes you only do the skinniest thing that moves you forward. And it's really important to tell people that there are a lot of steps to manage their expectations, but that we're going to break them into small bites. We're going to break them into possibly, digestible nibbles. And we're going to point out what we did and what we're going to do next. But this was done today. You didn't leave here not further ahead. We did this. Even if it was mailing the application, put the stamp on, it's in the outgoing mailbox. Something happened today that was not there yesterday. Really, really important. And when we talk about celebration, those are celebrations. Whew, something's behind us, done. And so we identify the approaches to accomplish the small steps. What are the things that help you get something done? For everybody, it's something different. For me, if I have to remember to do something, I have to put it on my calendar. And then sometimes I don't get to it, so I must change the date on it and put it on for the next day, but I can't let it get out of my sight or it could disappear. So that's one of my tools. But what is your tool? Is writing it? Do you remember things if you write them down? I never understand when you make an appointment with someone and they don't write it down. I don't understand it. It makes me kooky, but that's my problem. But how do you know to come here? Oh, unless it's I come there every Tuesday, and you know what you're doing. But do you use calendars? What helps for you? And I know I'm talking about very traditional tools that I'm used to, but a calendar for the people we serve has to fit in their pocket. It's not going to be a big book. And they have smartphones often. Can we teach them how to use one aspect of it, how to put an alarm on it? What kind of things can we do and have them become more self-sufficient on those micro steps so that they can do it? Then when they show up, celebrate it. James, do you have anything else to say around the strategies or the?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. Well, so an example of kind of an X factor situation would be, yes, a lot of our patients have phones and they'll put things into the calendar and then the phone will get stolen. So I think like that's an example of sort of like they're doing everything right and they're staying in shelter and there's just a lot of theft in shelters. So that would be an example of, I was trying to think earlier, what would be a good example of one of those X factor things. But also the second one, identify the approach to accomplish the small steps. Absolutely, I do that every time. In most cases, whenever I finish a meeting with a client, I think it's good to review what you were saying, like celebrating accomplishments. I think listing them at the end of a meeting, and so if I have a half-hour meeting with someone, I will say, okay, so just to sum it up, today we did X, we did Y, and we did Z. You're going to come in next Tuesday. You're going to give me the proof of income. So just really giving them these bullet points about this is what we did today, because I want you to. A lot of times we're doing stuff and we're not taking credit for it. And by we, I'm talking about the client. I want to show them how much they've gotten done. So today you came in. We made a dental appointment. We called Social Security. We mailed out this application. You're going to bring in this other paperwork. We're going to fill out this other application next week. Just really laying it out for them so they understand, like, yeah, I did that. They should take pride in that.
Yep. And what can you do in the meantime? What do you think? Can I give you an assignment?
Exactly.
And do with that. And everything is customized. Everything. I know we heard person-centered planning. I like the word customization because I think of it in the employment terms too, but and in a business term. But we customize plans based upon our observations and the observations we've shared with them about the patterns we've seen, about the patterns they've seen, about what they've learned from us. Have we taught them how to do the application? Or are we doing it all ourselves? Have we started to let go of some of those steps so that we're pushing that piece of paper closer across the table to them, or getting out of the seat so they can sit at the computer? Are we doing some of those things to make the plan a more self-sufficient plan, and doing it in a non-judgmental way, recognizing that we are always adjusting tasks and we're always adjusting approaches and we're always reflecting back how that might be. Again, I know you all do this because I've met you, all of you, and you're really, really profoundly committed professionals. But sometimes we forget, and it's helpful to talk about it. James, do you want to jump in, or can I?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think it's great that idea of sort of just eventually sort of nudging things more towards the client. I've said that to clients, especially people that are new to care. I say, we're going to start out. We're going to do a lot of paperwork. I'm going to start out doing most of it, sort of taking shorthand. But I'm going to give you homework, and eventually, I'm going to start giving applications to you. Are you okay with that? How would you feel about that? And I think if you sort of put it out there early, you want people will be filling out and addressing paperwork in other realms of their life and with other case managers, and you want them to be able, even if they have the other case manager that they work with take the lead, you want them to know that if that case manager weren't there, they could do this paperwork themselves, and they'd be familiar with these processes. I mean, things like food stamps and Social Security, like a lot of the paperwork is really routine, a lot of it is really familiar, a lot of it is really repetitive, like, you know, housing reassessments. Like, you want people to sort of just get into the hang of like knowing what that's about and to sort of have more ownership and agency in the process. Because you know what? I think most of the clients that I work with, and I say this to most of my clients and I mean it, I say, you are a great case manager and you would be great in the working in the social services field because you come here and I see what you do and you know what you're talking about. Unfortunately, they know it just through repetition and sort of being part of the system. But a lot of our clients are natural case managers. And I think when we're talking about like hopes and goals and dreams and all that, maybe not everyone's dream is to be a case manager or to work as a peer or to do some sort of counseling. But for people that want to, I want them to know, like, you could do this. It should not be an abstract, like, I see you do this when you come in. You can do this.
Yep. I'm going to move to the next slide. Thanks. The next, excuse me, I'm sorry. In my world, and I think in all your worlds, I don't know if you all have heard of something called the WRAP, or the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, but it's something that it's a SAMHSA-funded evidence-based practice that is typically carried out by peers. However, it is a step-by-step way for people to crisis plan, but in the affirmative. Instead of saying, I'm planning for the bad, the X factor, I'm planning for my wellness. What do I do to be well? What do I do to deal with triggers? What are my triggers? How do I look when I'm doing well? What are the signs of me not doing well, and what kind of things do I do to keep well? So it's in this wellness planning, this is what to do if, but it takes some steps, and I'm going to give a little advertisement for the WRAP. There's a WRAP app that those of you, and I can probably send you the old free information that used to be on the SAMHSA website about the WRAP. Might be interesting to you. Different perspective if you haven't seen it. And it's a different way of assessing and empowering people to look at themselves and taking some steps. But what people do is they identify the negatives. I hate to use the word, but it is true. When I'm doing well, this is a positive. I am sleeping regularly. I am eating a lot of vegetables. I am, walking outside. I'm smiling. I'm helpful. I make eye contact. These are the things when I'm well. I might even, give you a little fight here and there because I care enough about it. When I'm not well, I might be sleeping constantly. Or I'm irritable and I say kind of mean things to people. I don't make eye contact. I avoid, I isolate, things like that. Let's take some time to look at these things. What can I do, when I'm feeling better? So what are my resources? Who do I rely on? In some cases, for our folks, we're it. But we have to help them broaden their social capital because we're not, as long as we're paid people in their lives, we're really not truly social capital. We really want to help them to replicate some relationships. It does come down to that constantly, and identify what happens between us as the positive things you can bring elsewhere. To understand that a person will tell you the truth when they care truly about you, and that type of stuff. Another thing to be planning for your wellness, which is, again, a really affirmative practice, is what kinds of things, if something happens in my life that's an X factor thing, I ended up in the hospital. My T cell count is so far down and I screwed up on my meds, blah, 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 and I'm here because I'm sick. Who do I call? Who's going to feed my cat? Who's going to water my plant? Who's going to call my mother? Does she want to know? And what is the plan? You got to think about those X factor things. And if who do I want talking to my employer? Because that's really, circumstantial who's calling who. So this is, a moment to do some wellness planning, and I will post about the resources around this, and you can take the parts of it that make sense to you. But again, it is crisis planning, and it's on the positive side. Without this tool, you're not imparting something that will be part of the self-sufficiency journey, because this is a tool for them. James, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah, I completely agree with you about the importance of wellness planning. I think it's really, I think, how would I say this? I think a lot of our clients are sort of used to looking at things as very binary, like success or failure. There are things that are kind of less binary, like you're, in a lot of cases you're either housed or not housed. But I think a lot of what we do is more about gradation. And I think, I worry that sometimes our clients think of wellness or happiness or success as this sort of like permanent enlightened state, that lasts forever. And I think part of what we're doing by sort of empowering our patients is helping them understand that happiness as well as sadness is something that kind of, it comes and it goes. Like everything is sort of pendulumatic, it comes in waves. And I think talking to them about what their experiences have been and what happiness would look like for them and what wellness would look like, because I guess one thing that I worry about is, for a lot of our clients, wellness, they might reduce it to their CD4 and viral load. Like I don't ever want things to, it's like for me it's about quality of life. I don't want things to be a numbers game where my CD4 was 500 last month, but now it's 475 and I'm really worried. Like what we're really focusing on is sort of overall health and sort of quality of life. And I think, again, you have to sort of do, they intersect at some point. And I definitely think that people are going to be, people's health will be better if they are feeling better and if they're happier. That's the most obvious thing I've ever said. But I don't necessarily know whether the individuals I'm working with, I don't know necessarily what their thoughts might be on this subject about what it means to be well or what it means to be happy. So it involves all this sort of to even get to the point of wellness planning, there's all this pre-planning and discussion about, what does it mean to you to be well, and how would you know if you're well, and how do you know if you're happy? And again, you're talking about sort of planning from a good place. You don't want to be a downer and say, well, your happiness may not last. You don't want to be a doomsayer, but people's happiness, it kind of doesn't last. It sort of goes away and comes back and then goes and then returns. So you just sort of want to, I guess where we want to motivate people the most is when they've told us there's something that may sort of make it hard for them to be motivated, and that's where we may need to step in to motivate them. I think for the most part, I think people have it. They know what to do. They know where they're going. I think there are periods where people might be frozen by indecision or anxiety or fear, and that's the only time when I really get concerned about a lot of our clients, and sort of that's where this wellness planning and decision tree diagram kind of stuff comes into play. And the other thing is that when talking to people about decision trees and who to call under certain circumstances, I think the other important part of that is, to let them know that if we're going to reach out to a family member, we would never disclose personal information, that we would be very, very discreet, and that confidentiality is sort of the most important part of what we do. But also I think it would be important to talk to them about, what would you want me to say if you had a family member and you wanted me to call them if this happened? What would I say to them, and how would you want me to say it? Because we're just sort of proxies in that case where we're reaching out on behalf of the client and doing their bidding. So it's really important that how we express ourselves be according to their wishes.
And in this planning about who you talk to, this is where you introduce your releases, because we can't, any of us, call just anybody and tell them anything. I think, except if it's life and death, I think I would go over and pass the release if it was at that level. But this is where you're empowering people, where you give me the permission for what you want me to say, and not say, you put the limits on it, on you. However, this lets me pick up the phone and say what you want me to say. And those are just parts of it. And this wellness planning is not something you do obviously in one sitting. It's something that is a process, and it may be months. You take the time to discover, because recovery is discovery and rediscovery of who you are and reclaiming who you are. So recovery is a process. I know you hear that, and the process takes time, and it has starts and stops, and you learn from each of those. I'm going to move on to the next slide. James, I'm giving it to you because you're the celebration king.
Celebrating achievements. We love it. Just so our clients do so much good stuff, and whenever possible, we always want to recognize it. And I don't think our clients ever, I don't think they'll ever refuse if we acknowledge their hard work. And I've always said that being in care full-time is a full-time job. I think a lot of our clients just kind of suck it up and get on with it. But I've said to clients, like, I don't know how you have to arrange transportation and show up, and they want you to bring this paperwork and have labs and all that. And you're seeing all these different providers for different specialists. Really just, it is a huge accomplishment. And I think there's a number of different ways to really recognize our clients' accomplishment. Obviously, as the list says, certificates, or goodies. I always we keep things like shampoo and socks and all that on hand. I always offer it to people. Can I get you a glass of water? Can I get you a cup of coffee? People are, can I get you a lunch? People are putting in hard work. They need to have fuel, and in some cases the fuel might be lunch. In some cases the fuel is encouragement. Because I think a lot of the, if someone has a small issue and it can be resolved in one session, that's fine. But sometimes it takes months to resolve certain issues, especially pertaining to things like housing and sort of these big life issues. That is a marathon for people. If you're able to text message, that is a great way to get a hold of people. I regularly send people cards either on their birthday or just to let them know. Sometimes I'll send a card to let people know I'm thinking about them. But sometimes after an encounter, I will send people a card and just say, look, I was thinking about what we talked about during our encounter, and I just want to let you know the following. And just sort of reflect back to them something they have in print, just to let them know that I'm thinking of them, not just when they're in my office or in front of me, but sort of, random times when I'm doing the dishes or I'm just doing problem solving in my head. And I think this one, acknowledgement and validation when things are good and when things are crappy. So we give people all sorts of support, chin up, you can do this when things are bad. But I think it's great to say to patients, how's the housing going? You've been there for 9 months. And just remind them, you made that happen. By the way, I just want to remind you, that was because of your hard work. I think sometimes we'll sort of validate once and then move on. But I will say that to a patient every time I see them. And at some point it becomes a sick joke because I'm just saying, remember that housing, that's you. Because we sort of hop in at a certain point of their life, and at a certain point they may not be working with us, but their hard work carries on, and we need to just acknowledge, and their accomplishments carry on. I think coffee and chit chat. So again, you want to find time to discuss relevant. You always want to find time to discuss relevant things, and you also want to find time to discuss irrelevant things. It's all part of the relationship building process. And sometimes, you can ask people questions, sort of roundabout questions, to get an idea about their background or their thoughts on things or their history. And sometimes you can ask people completely random, wacky questions, which I do all the time. I will say, do you have any thoughts on Bob Seger? And I have no thoughts on Bob Seger, but that usually leads to a bigger discussion about all things non-Bob Seger related. It's amazing. People just want an invitation to sort of open up a little bit sometimes. And I think that if you start, it doesn't matter where you start or how you start. I think as long as it's organic and natural, but you can sort of ask the Bob Seger question, and then you find you're talking about sort of people's relationship with their family. It leads in all sorts of strange directions. So, even when we're celebrating achievements, we're kind of fishing for clues about, we're trying to anticipate unmet needs or trying to come up with ideas about what to work on next. I think casual conversation can sometimes be a way to identify those needs. And this last one, anything that's not bad news is good news. I mean, everything is relative and everything exists in a context. So, if you have a patient that kind of hates where they're living, the key messages are, we're going to work on housing, like really good housing that's not this housing, and this housing is not great, but would you feel it's better than being in the shelter or being on the streets? In most cases, you're hoping the person says, well, yes. So then you have some sort of context, some sort of like relativity. I think the client that you were talking about earlier, Sylvia, who's just sort of like always complaining and saying negative things, sometimes that's just a way of sort of keeping people away because it works. When someone's always complaining, what they're saying is like, stay away from me, I don't want to engage. Maybe they don't have the emotional fortitude to handle like different types of like, maybe they don't have like, they don't feel they have the strength to handle like a case management, type working relationship, and that's their way of keeping people at bay. It works. When people complain all the time, people do stay away or don't take them seriously, and as a result, a lot of our clients who complain all the time are not used to having anyone listen to them because they complain and then people don't listen to them because it's their baseline. I think your idea of like reassessing people and saying, well, there's a reason for everything, and what is the reason? I'm going far afield of this slide, just by the way, just so you know. But I find if you can get underneath the surface of how people are presenting, there's usually someone very, very different there. And if you have one success under your belt, if you have just one, that's when you can start really celebrating achievements. Because all it takes is one to say, you know what? 10 minutes ago, we didn't have this. Now we do because of your hard work.
And, just kind of on the celebration, when we were talking about this, this webinar, when we were planning it, something had happened during that time. Sarah, who I work with, came into my office and she said, and let me think of a name to use, Philip, just carried a box upstairs for me. He helped me. Now that seems like, and she thanked him lavishly, that seems a little silly. However, Philip was doing some work outside and he had been pricked with something and ended up with that flesh-eating disease, and he lost his arm. And it was only about a year and change ago. And he's got prosthetic arm, and he hasn't felt like a full person since that happened. He feels very less than. And she's a very fit person who could have carried that box very easily. But she asked him to, and he did it. He would do anything for her. And he was a full person. And she made sure, not like, oh, thank you. You helped me carry a box with only one arm. It wasn't like that. It was like, wow, thanks. Because you know what? This is one trip instead of two. I really appreciate it. He came through as an equal partner. He's whole. And that is like a celebration that is done a little different from attaboy. It's really, acknowledging a fact and authentically reflecting back, there's a wholeness here. And I think that was a real gift to him that helps him heal and helps him recover his fullness and his wholeness again. But I had promised I would bring that story up here because it really was impactful to me that day.
It's a great story.
It really is wonderful, and I'm so glad she told me, because you heard how excited she was. We were on the call. Oh, carried it up for me. So we celebrated too, because, we've gone through a lot. Sarah's gone through so much with this person. So that was a gift to her. These celebrations are not just for the people we serve. They're for us. Don't forget that, because you deserve it. Any more on celebrations?
No.
Oh. James, I believe is yours.
Is it? No, last time you took it, but I'll take it this time.
Okay, thanks.
The piñata theory, okay, piñatas. So it's a very rich metaphor on several different levels. When you bemoan why are our clients sometimes working against their own best. Like, we can see things from a different vantage point than they are, than they see them from. And I think daily throughout the day, if it was as easy as telling someone what to do and then them doing it, then everything would get done. But it doesn't. And part of this work that can be kind of intense sometimes is you're seeing clients unintentionally thwart themselves. Or you're seeing people engage in behaviors that we can sometimes, if we're noticing people's patterns, we can sort of like see where things could be heading, and it makes us nervous. And I think this is a message about sort of working with people over a long period of time. Sometimes you are the piñata, sometimes you hit the piñata. I mean,
and you have a choice.
And you
really do have a choice. Take a stop and think about it. Am I going to be the piñata today, or am I hitting that piñata? Right. Either way, though, this is the big secret. Either way, there's still going to be candy inside.
Exactly.
That's kind of the cool part about piñatas. There's something that's going to drop out of there that's going to be a learning either way. So be open to it and look at it from that perspective and shift. It's all perspective. This is one of the things James said. It's all about perspective. And that's where we go.
Yeah, I mean, this of all the slides, this is the one whenever I look at it, it just kind of takes me out into space, because you just like I think a lot about our clients and sort of like what our clients have so many skills, and there are areas where they have deficits, and I think how over a long period of time, like, how do you provide people with the skills to address what might be perceived as deficits or sort of blind spots? And then, so you're right, it takes me back to this idea that, it's a working relationship. I mean, we benefit from it as well in terms of what we learn, life lessons that we learn from our clients and getting to know them as individuals. And they benefit from it in that we kind of need each other. It's funny how case management in some cases is a one-way street in terms of, like, I say to clients all the time, I work for you. But it's a two-way street in terms of sort of that exchange of energy and sort of information that we get from clients. I know there's a lot of stuff they could probably do without us, but the stuff I learn from my clients, I use to work with other clients. I take it to my relationships with other clients. I've suddenly gotten tongue-tied at the end of this, because this is so complex for me to get my head around.
And even after 20-something years, it's still complex. And even after 40-something years, it's still complex to me. Even though I think all of you just said, no way. So there's a lot of color in a piñata, too. I think I'm just going to extrapolate from this picture everything positive about it and use that, because that's my hope. I always find hope. And I invite everybody else to stay in that place of hope. Can we move on?
Yes.
Okay. We want to hear from you here. So we have 31 people on the phone, and maybe more. I don't know what I got. Attendees. Here we go. So, anybody wants to say something? I guess you raise your hands, right?
You can raise your hand, or you can comment in the chat box or the Q&A, and you can see anything there. There's nothing at the moment, though.
Can I ask a leading question? Yes.
Yeah.
I am racked with self-doubt all the time. I mean, and this webinar is about client coaching. I mean, I think the more you do case management, the more you become aware of its subtleties, and then the harder it gets. In terms of client coaching, I mean, a lot of you have presumably been in the field for a little bit and might have worked with patients for years. Do you ever have days where you just think, what the heck is going on? Or do people just sort of, get a little bit of case management under their belt, and then suddenly it's like, it's easy? Because I want to be whoever you are if it's easy. Tell me your secrets.
Well, that was that was a pointed question.
It is, because I just, I don't know. Do you have those days, Sylvia, where you just think, I don't even know what's going on anymore? I think patients feel better when they see how racked with doubt I am. Because I'm not going to come into the room and say, I know everything, I will fix all your problems. No one can do that. But there are particular days, especially when things converge, where it gets complex and weird.
I absolutely have those days. I have days where I don't know why. I mean, I always say this, if we were looking at what we do from outer space and looking down, we would think those people and systems are nuts.
Yeah.
Why? Nothing makes sense here. It's too hard. It's too stupid. That's my usual thing. And then I go, and I'm going to conquer it.
Yes.
But that's what I do tell the people we serve when things seem a little stupid. But here's how to do it.
Yeah.
I'm honest with them.
Good.
I like to see some of our new people on here. Can I introduce you all, now that you see the list, to Divya Chandra? She's new at our Yale team. Just thought I'd point her out, stick her out. And welcome. And a lot of our staff are on here. Hi, guys.
Sylvia, this is Jessica. I have a question.
Yes.
So I was really moved by your description of these little things that you can do, like scooching your chair closer, having somebody, having a client get into the computer and sort of do things for themselves. I'm wondering about, first of all, how do you sort of get to that place with clients, or do you think that it just sort of happens, or are there cues that you're looking for to sort of cross a little bit of that, client service provider barrier? How do you sort of know when to approach a little closer?
What's really interesting to me, I was thinking about, just when you said that, I had an observation. You're familiar with our storefront, Jessica, so I can describe this to you, but I was in here, I think yesterday, and Bryce was working with a couple of clients in here on power, and I saw him doing that precise type of thing. And I don't know, Bryce, I don't know if we can unmute you, and you might want to say something about that, but I know it's something that I ask, do you want me to do this for you, or should you, can you do it? Let's move over to that. I think it's all very organic for me. And also that relationship building, those little things you do to have that person experience a level of depth and regard for them as a full human being. So in regarding a person as a full human being, there are natural expectations in there that we are equals, that we are on par. And I'm just inviting, I don't know if, I thought Bryce was on here. Maybe he's not on anymore.
I think he might have had to jump off.
Oh, okay. I'm really sorry about that, because I actually saw him doing that. But it comes with the development of a relationship and testing the waters. You do test the waters. It is saying, hey, you know what? We could do 2 of these at once if you fill out that one. It's things like that, teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work. But, that kind of stuff. So I think it's reading it. It's also some folks are not in a place to lay stuff on them. And I think most of us have developed the skill of seeing when someone's kind of needs to be just taken care of. And sometimes people want to move on. So the situations are so individualized. Does that answer your question, Jessica?
Somewhat. I guess I'm just mostly curious about, how do you get to that place? It sounds like some of what you're describing is somewhat intuitive, but if it's not for some, for someone, I can't imagine that every single case manager out there, does everything by intuition. What are some of those more? Are there like specific cues that you would be looking for in a client who's saying, Go ahead.
Jessica, everything's assessing. It's not just a tool. Always be assessing. You're always watching it. The person who shows up on time for appointments, the person who carries a pen, the person who maybe has told you that they're feeling good today, the person who gives you some news. So you're looking at those things that they're bringing in, showing where they are as far as their self-sufficiency. Sometimes people will tell me that a housing list opened, and I'll go right on and look it up. That's a person I would probably sooner than later have them take some of that on. But then I guess the observations are really not so much intuitive as because intuition means a little bit more that I'm not making concrete observations, but I'm listening. A person's reticent to answer any questions. They're kind of low energy. They're flat. Those are people I'm not going to push right now. I'm engaging them. I want them to come back. The most important thing to me is that they come back and they learn to trust me. And then as those pieces start falling into place, then it's more of that. And then some people tell you they want to do it. Let them.
Right.
But do test the waters. Do you think you can do this? Can I give these to you? You want to sit over there and do them? You want to come over here? We have a computer lab. You want to do that? Those are the things that ask the person. And we do, at our organization, have resources to send people places where they can get a little other help. Like if they're experiencing homelessness, we have a day program. We are getting a nice cadre of social work students who can give some one-on-one instruction. So we do have some resource here, which I think is great to develop so that a person can get a little more help to become more self-sufficient, more than I can give them. But it is from observation more than intuition. And I guess the observation is like, you can tell when a person's closed off. Don't push too hard when they're shut down. Because that's not a good time. So I guess that's kind of what it is more, is assessing where you're at. But don't forget to start that's an option to slide it across the table. It's our job to get the person's housed. That meaning me and the person that's getting housed. It's our job. It's not my job. It's ours. So, or get a job. It's ours. I can't work for you.
Right. One thing I've noticed that you do that I really admire, Sylvia, is you do constantly assess and reassess. Like you're very good at that. And the other thing is you can counter that by asking really direct or blunt questions, which I really appreciate. Like, when with the story you were telling a little while ago about your patient where you sort of barked at him and then you said, oh, that's a great way to speak to someone. Like, you could have gone the other direction and been really sincere and apologetic. But I do that all the time where I'm like, I think it's great to ask like, to either ask really direct questions like, are you in a paperworky mood today? How are you feeling about paperwork? And I always say today to see, what it's just for today. Some people are great with paperwork. There are periods where maybe they're not in the mood to do it. But I feel like asking the question is the important part, like saying, how do you feel about making some calls with me today? Just put it out there and they'll say yes or no. But I guess sort of the role of like, I'm less touchy-feely when there's work to be done. Like I really want to find out what needs to be done and who's going to do it. And I think by asking it sort of directly and neutrally, it allows you to sort of divvy things up fairly. I think there are times, you're very good at knowing when to dance around things and when to sort of go into the heart of it. And I think in most cases, it seems counterintuitive. Like the more the more fragile someone is, maybe sort of the more direct you can be, so there's sort of this really clear sense of accomplishment and role defining.
Yeah, and sometimes, look at, what's really, really important is to know and expect to sometimes say it wrong, and you don't get what you wanted from the person, and you know you did it, like I barked today when that person wasn't in the mood for the bark, and I better take what the fallout is and own it and move on so that they know that sometimes I'm wrong, you know, and I'm okay with being wrong. There's nothing, honestly, I don't know everything, and I think that most people will let you know I really don't know everything, but I know a lot. But I don't know everything, and I'm happy to say I don't know something, but I'll figure it out, or I'll find out, or ask someone. And that's a skill I want them to take on too. What I don't know, there's a way to find out. I want them to learn the way to find out.
And it's okay not to know.
It's okay not to know. Everybody in college thought I was the smartest kid in class, and you know why? A teacher or professor, asked me a question, and I said, I don't know. Because I didn't know a thing in that class, and they all thought I knew everything. Because I went with confidence, I don't know. And I got to tell you something, that I was very reinforced that behavior. I say it a lot.
I think the modern equivalent is, that's a good question. Which I say throughout the day.
I don't know, and I'll find out.
Yeah.
Anybody no hands, no nothing? Have we done such a great job? You have nothing to say to us? That's great.
Oh, well, we just got a hand. We got a hand, folks.
Hand.
Woo!
What?
All right. It looks like Felipe would like to talk, so I'm going to quickly allow to talk. Felipe, we should be able to hear you now.
Hello.
Felipe?
No, I think this is still on. Look.
Is there more than one person on that call? Well, that was all exciting for a second.
It was.
Oh, there. Felipe?
I've unmuted them. We'll see.
Are you there, Felipe?
I'm putting this to the side.
He says he's using the phone, but it sounds like we can't hear him.
Does he have his mute button on?
I'm inquiring.
I sense it's a pinata-related question.
How are you hearing from Felipe? Is he talking?
We're talking over chat.
Well, it says mute over his name over here. Oh, that would be I would have to mute him. Or it would be to mute him. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, this technology always gets to us, doesn't it?
I'm very analog. I really don't understand any of this technology. It's amazing how tech savvy some of the younger clients are. They know everything about this stuff.
I know those young people these days.
I know. I was aware earlier when you were talking about sort of like, I write things on the back of my hand. That's how I remember. So on any given day,
I haven't done that in 1,000 years.
I have a lot of marker writing on my hands all the time.
Do you think that we can resolve this situation?
I'm working on it. Is there anyone else who has a question in the meantime?
Oh, so in the chat, Felipe says, I just want to thank you for the great presentation and make more comments, but I guess I'm muted on your side. Felipe, you could, if you have any more questions you want to, or comments and you want to put them in the chat box while we're trying to figure out how to unmute you, you can feel free to go ahead and do that. Sorry, we're not
intentionally muted.
He's unmuted on our end. I've promoted you to a panelist, Felipe, to see if that solves anything. If you want to try speaking now.
Well, I think that Felipe muted his own phone. Whoops, I went down another slide.
Awesome.
And you know that you all can reach out to us while Felipe's still trying to figure this out. And so you get a little preview of what's coming up. Look at this.
Ooh.
I'd like to have you look at this for a while. So you're not just staring at a red screen. But look what's coming up: promoting engagement and retention in care, transition to standard of care, because that's what this is ultimately about, a HRSA grant, steps towards self-sufficiency housing, steps towards self-sufficiency employment. These are all good subjects. I hope that you will enjoy them and want to come on.
So if I may just say a little bit about these Year 3 webinars. So we are going to have, we'd like to work with sites specifically who are interested in sharing what they know about any of these sort of various topics. So for the most part, we are going to take a step back from presenting the TA webinars. We're only doing 4 of them in Year 3, and then also we're going to ask that sites with a particularly, good approach to promoting engagement and retention and care, or have really worked out a really successful plan for how to transition clients into their standard of care. We want to highlight those stories, and then we especially want to start looking at the identifiers around what are the steps towards self-sufficiency, and then how do we recognize clients who are demonstrating the ability to be self-sufficient regarding these 2 topics, housing and employment. So if you are interested in sharing some of your awesomeness with us, we would really, really love that. And even if you don't think you're ready, we might think that you're ready, and we might be coming for you and asking you to co-present with us on some of these topics.
Thank you, Jessica. So I had Felipe, being a little creative, call in on my cell phone, so I'm going to put him on speakerphone and see if everyone can hear him that way.
Cool.
So take it away, Felipe.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Okay, I just want to thank you for the great presentation, and I was wondering if we could, or if we're going to get the slides of the presentation.
Oh, yeah.
And also I want to say that what I'm learning dealing with people is that case management, we may get all the academic knowledge and training, but there is nothing better than having empathy and experience with each different person. That's what really builds up our sensitivities to deal with each individual that we have to deal with. Sorry about the redundance of words, but I did learn a lot from this presentation. I want to let you know that.
That's really sweet to share. Thank you, Felipe.
That's it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Felipe.
I'm just going to say that, so even from that brief interaction, Felipe is someone with a lot of heart. That's what it takes to be a great case manager, heart and perseverance. So you're right, it's about the personal connections we make, that we forge. So thank you.
And thank you, Julia, for doing some creative problem solving there. So with our 3 minutes left, I just want to just wrap us up. So thank you so very much to Sylvia and to James once again for a really fabulous webinar. Thank you so much. And thank you, Julia, for hosting the chat and again with the creative problem solving. This is, as we mentioned at the top of the call, this is the last of our scheduled webinars for our year 2. We will be heading into year 3, and with the webinars that we had just listed, we would really love for folks to let us know if you're interested in co-facilitating any of these with us. But again, we will be also asking for folks in particular that we know have something to say in these areas. So please stay tuned. And in the meantime, if you have any questions for us, or if you want to access this the live recording of this webinar, you can do so via Basecamp, or you can send us an email, and we will be in touch with you again next month for our evaluation and dissemination call. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Have a great rest of the day and rest of your summer.
Thank you so much. Bye, you guys.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.